Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Michael, here we are for our next podcast episode of From Our Generation. It is September 26, 2025.
A beautiful day in the Mid-South.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely gorgeous. This is my favorite time of year.
It's the best. May and October.
Yes.
We're almost to October.
Yeah, the nice part for me of October is I love the changing colors, because in Nashville we get lots of colors.
Well, the sun is warm and the air is cool. It's just perfect.
Yes, it sure is. All righty. So, Mike, since we were here last Friday, Charlie Kirk's memorial service was on Sunday. And I watched a great deal of it. I think you said you watched almost all of it.
Most of it, yeah.
And there were some things that struck me during that memorial service that I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about Charlie Kirk and what we and I don't know that we learned it necessarily just from the memorial service, but there's some additional information that I've learned, and I can't remember whether or not the information that I learned came from the service or came from other articles that I've read, because I've read a lot of articles about Charlie.
There's one thing I'd like to say before we pitch into this, which is that I had no intention of watching the service. I did not know that much about Charlie Kirk. I didn't follow him for sure. I'm not in the demographic that he was pitching to begin with. But my sister-in-law called and she said, "What are you doing?" And we were doing a lot of nothing. Susan and I reading the paper, I think, and she was watching the service. And I thought, there's something going on here culturally that I need to understand better. And so I sat down to watch a little bit of it. I had intentions to move on and do some other things. And I got up and did a few things along the way, but other than that, I watched all of it because it was fascinating to try to uncode, the significance of this. Not to say that I know what people were saying better than they did, but who these people were, what influence they have, who else is going along with this and seeing it, what influences does it have on them. That was what interested me, and it was a fascinating afternoon.
Yeah. So, Michael, we've heard because a lot of what we learned at that memorial service, he was a true believer in Jesus Christ as his personal Savior.
Yes.
And so therefore, Charlie Kirk believed in God.
Yes.
As we understand it in the Judeo-Christian sense. And he also believed that God sent his son to earth to die for those who believed in Christ. And
yes.
and it was clear that Charlie believed that all people are sinners and none by themselves can ascend to heaven except by their belief in Jesus Christ, who died for their sins. Now, that then gets to the question of, for me, it's an interesting question of, do people believe in, and I believe Charlie Kirk did believe in divine intervention because of his beliefs. So if divine intervention happens, then it means God exists. For people who don't believe that God exists in the same sense as Charlie Kirk, and I'm not talking about Christ at this point, just the God part, that God created the earth, and that God that prayers can be answered, and that they're answered, and that doesn't mean they always are, but do you think that and the reason I ask this question is that Charlie Kirk started Turning Point at age 18. I mean, this is an amazing thing as a 77-year-old. Looking at
that being you,
me, recognizing what Charlie Kirk did at the time in his life that he did it is astounding to me. It's just like recognizing for me that Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence when he was 33 years old. That he had studied so much of the classics and so many ideas to be able to write that document. Just sit down and write it. Charlie Kirk, at age 18, with no money at all, started an organization that now, at the time of his assassination, was on 3,500 high school and college campuses combined. And you and I, before we started the podcast, we both agreed, I think, that Charlie Kirk's efforts in the 2024 election may have been what was the margin of victory for Donald Trump. So here you have a person who didn't go to college, but I also have learned he studied and took 19. He has taken 19 different Hillsdale courses
Online.
Mm-hmm. He has studied, and I made a list of things that he's read.
If you're going to ask me a question, we probably need to stop because I've lost count of how many things I'm responding to.
Well, okay. Well, I'll get to I'll give you the question again in just a little bit. But these are the things that Charlie Kirk has read the Bible numerous times, studies the Bible. He completed 19 courses at Hillsdale. He has studied the Declaration of Independence. He has studied the state constitutions that came into being after the American Revolution.
And before the U.S. Constitution.
And before the U.S. Constitution, and then there's still state constitutions that exist today.
Of course.
And if you ask him a question about one of them, he can answer it without looking it up.
Yeah.
The Articles of Confederation, he knows those backwards and forwards. He knows the Constitution backwards and forwards and every single amendment. And he also knows a lot about many, many major pieces of legislation that have passed. And so that's what gives him the ability to go on these college campuses and debate students who don't feel like it's a fair fight because he has more knowledge than they do.
Well, it's interesting you'd use the word feel. Because a lot of times people will use that to respond. I feel like this, and I asked a lawyer one time in a meeting. I had hired this lawyer on a health homeowners association, and I said, "What does such and such say about this?" I think it was a document or our bylaws. What does it say about that? I was asking for a citation language. He said, "Well, I feel like this, and I didn't want to know what he felt like. I wanted to know what was the fact."
Yeah,
and there was a fact about what that document said. So. There's so much here, about how we feel about things. What is truth, I think, is one of the questions we're ultimately getting at here.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where I guess I would start with trying to respond to all your facts here. We started with religion.
Yes. Right? And I guess my question is, do you think that there has ever been divine intervention?
Well, I am a Christian. I'm a practicing Christian, Presbyterian, elder in the Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
I have made the professions that go with that. I like it that's very broad. I just accept Jesus as my Savior, and that's all. I don't have to agree to transubstantiation and, substitutionary atonement, which I was raised with, that, Jesus substituted for us and gave his life so all our sins are forgiven. I think that's a little over the top. I just follow Jesus. I think it's a good example to follow. So your question, is there divine intervention? Well, a lot of people feel so, right? There's people that look for parking spaces, and when they get one, they think God has acted. Now, it's very real to them. I have no wish to go disabuse them of the notion that God got them a parking space. I think it's a little trivial to think that God is occupied with things like that.
Well, what about the American Revolution? Here we had this ragtag military fighting against the greatest military on earth, and we defeated them. You have George Washington, who had over 20 bullet holes in his coat, but never one hit his body. Yeah. Do you think divine intervention was at play in the American Revolution?
I think there are a lot of larger causes and forces that we are not capable of understanding. A lot of times they are attributed to God. I am enough of a scientist to say I know that I can't prove that that's from God.
That's why I asked
It's not a scientific truth. I may feel like something has happened for a cause that gives me awe.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't understand why that happened. And it's certainly not a scientific truth that, that my wife agreed to marry me.
Yeah, that's why I asked you if you believe that divine intervention ever happens. You can't prove it. The question is, do you believe it ever happens? I do. I will tell you, and I believe that divine intervention is actually going on right now at Turning Point. And that's what's going to be interesting and there's nothing I can do about it one way or the other. But if there is such a thing as divine intervention, and if it's going on now, the folks who are opposing it are on the losing side of that.
Well, I guess I would say I don't think God participates in wars. And, so if there was divine intervention in the American Revolution, I'm a little skeptical about that.
Okay.
But I do think there are greater causes. There are natural ends that seem to be stitched into the nature of things.
Okay.
You know, even in the Declaration of Independence, you use our Creator has given us, whether that's a God or whether it's nature. I think they meant God, but it could mean nature. That, you know, we're intended to be free. We're not intended to be owned by other people.
Intended by whom?
I think it's in the nature of things. Maybe is a better way than intended. Intended is a bad because it suggests there is someone with an intent.
Yeah.
But I think it's natural for people to own their own labor, to be themselves free and independent of other people, to own them. Okay. You just start with that as one thing that seems rather obvious to me. It's stitched into the nature of things. Is it a rule that God created? Here's an interesting example we came on in our Knowledge Product series. Is it wrong to torture children because God said so, or because that's in the nature of things? I tend toward the latter explanation. It's wrong whether any God said it or not. You know, if God were to say, actually, it's okay now, I wouldn't believe it. You know, it's wrong to torture children. And so the point is a moral standard dependent of or superior to what you think about a God?
Okay,
That's an interesting question.
If a person believes that God exists and there are moral standards that come from God, i.e., in the Declaration of Independence, that there are certain rights that come from God, if that is true, and by the way, it's either true or it's not. It doesn't really matter what you and I believe. It is either. I'm not saying it's. What
I would say is we can't establish whether it's true or not. There's different kinds of truth, and it's true in some ways for some people.
No, I'm agreeing that we can't prove it's true. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Is we can't prove it, but it is. It either is or it isn't. We just can't prove it. I mean, we can't prove
That's
it
a matter of logic.
Yeah, we can't prove it one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so if there is such a thing as divine intervention, and if it's at play here, and if it has been at play at other times, and I'm talking about now in American history, I think back when we, a couple of podcasts ago, we talked about Tim Kaine claiming that anyone who believes that God gives rights to individuals is believing in Sharia law, and that all rights to individuals come from government.
That it's like Sharia law, and that
yeah, and he said all rights come from government. You don't get any rights from any source other than government. Yeah. And I wholly disagree with that.
Me too.
Well, then there has to be something. You're saying it's a kind of a natural thing, and I believe it's more than that. But that doesn't matter because it's a belief that each of us has.
I could say I believe it's better to be kind than to be cruel. Mm-hmm. Okay, I believe that wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. But there's some cases where I'm not very kind, and I don't apologize for it. Sometimes kindness is misplaced.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I believe it, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. But with Charlie Kirk, what's going to be interesting is Charlie Kirk's organization, and this is what I'm saying is I look at I thought the speeches were really quite something. And they were so many, as you say. There was initially it was I believe you would describe. I think you described it as a religious service,
a worship service that had an altar call for people to give their life to Christ. Yeah, that's very Baptist.
Yes, so that was a religious service. Then it moved into the people from Turning Point who worked with Charlie and how they were going to honor Charlie's vision and work to build Turning Point into even a bigger and more influential and organization, and then you had many politicians who got up and gave their personal testimony in terms of not testimony to God necessarily, but J.D. Vance talked about how Charlie Kirk, and he said the last 2 weeks I've talked more about my relationship with Jesus Christ than I've talked about in the last 10 years, and so the politicians who spoke. And about their relationship with Charlie Kirk, I thought that was really quite something. Mm-hmm. But then I look at that Charlie Kirk took 13 years to build the organization from nothing to 3,500 chapters. Since his assassination, there have been over 100,000 new applications. 100,000. So I ask myself, is there anything going on here? That's all. A
lot of people would say that's divine intervention. That it's making a tragedy into something much greater.
Yeah, And what I'm saying is it either is or it isn't. You and I agree that neither of us can know and neither of us can prove it. But it is just a fascinating thing to me Because I can't think of anyone in my lifetime who has been that consequential at such an early age. And then at his death, what he had worked on for 13 years may become many times bigger. And that is, I'm just saying, as I think about that, that is really quite amazing.
It is amazing, and it begs the question of whether we think religion is net positive or net negative. There's a lot of people that think it's been responsible for a lot of the wrong in the world, a lot of the wars over religious ideology and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I can very well see where some people would see this and be very uncomfortable with its nearness of politics and religion.
Sure.
And get into separation of church and state and stuff like that. I think people are entitled to express their beliefs. And so I'm happy to see this kind of event. And I think it's persuasive to a lot of people. They'd rather forgive their enemies rather than start a vendetta where we're going to have eye for eye and everybody ends up toothless and blind, right? If you use the Old Testament, eye for an eye, which is, I think, basically about proportionality, by the way, not vengeance. It's about you don't kill somebody because they scratched you, right? You respond proportionally. But that nuance aside, I can see from a Jewish point of view how somebody might be very uncomfortable that this is equating the American cause with that of Christianity. I know a lot of people are afraid of Christian nationalism if we're thinking we're going to combine the two. I don't interpret that that's what they're trying to do. I think they're saying these are both commitments that we have. We see them as synonymous. But you don't have to be Christian to be a really great American and fully subscribe to what it means to be an American. Jews have had 2,000 years of having to come to terms with, are they going to be friends with or adversaries of Christians?
Well, there's, a Christian also believes in the Old Testament. A Christian also believes in the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
And so it's not like that Judaism and Christianity are opposites. Now,
well, that's my first example. I've got Hindu friends. I think they can be good Americans, too. I have Muslim friends. They can be good Americans. There's some aspects of Muslim belief that are incompatible with American ideals.
Yeah.
And we all know what they are.
Yeah.
I have Japanese friends. They combine Buddhism and Shinto.
Right. Taoism, yeah.
Yeah, and I have Chinese friends who have converted to Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I'm open to all of these kinds of convictions, religious convictions. I think people should be able to express them in public, and I think they mostly deserve to be accepted. The line I draw is if you try to force me to follow your beliefs. Some people may be perceiving here that they're going to be forced into a Christian framework.
If I'm an atheist and I'm trying to force you to follow my beliefs that government is the source of all rights?
Well, I just said it. If you try to force me to follow your beliefs, I'm resisting.
Okay. So Tim Kaine's statement offends you.
I think it's ignorant. He's not trying to force me to believe what he said. I don't perceive that.
He's trying to force you to believe that government determines what you can and cannot do. Does that offend you? That government is the only institution that you answer to?
Yeah, I'm against that.
Yeah,
right?
I'm very offended by that.
Okay.
But he's not, because he's the one who thinks he has power.
We had this when Clarence Thomas was confirmed for the Supreme Court. He was questioned about his belief in natural law, back to this ambiguity about creator and nature and things like that. Natural law is what I was trying to articulate earlier. It's something that's in the nature of things that we have an allegiance to. And I remember Biden asking him, do you believe in natural law? Because the resentment was anything trumps what the government says, right? And so you have a political alignment here that government is supreme, what it says goes. It's the ultimate sovereign that's going to determine everything else, including rights. That's not the American way.
No.
The Declaration says that rights are ours by our Creator.
Right.
And that the government then is hired by the people to enforce those rights.
Right, and that's what the Declaration of Independence says very clearly. And it says when a government abuses those rights, it should be overthrown. It's the right of the people to overthrow that government and establish a new one.
Yes.
And then if you read the preamble to our U.S. Constitution, it begins the same way.
Right.
That we, the people, are in charge. We are the ones who are establishing the government, not the other way around.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is this gets into it's it seems like who cares? Well, this is what the fundamental divide is now in our country. That's what I believe.
Between what?
Is government the be all and the end all, or is the individual and the individual rights, and the government has the limitations on government power from a moral and religious standpoint. There's a limit to what they can do, their power.
Well, at the risk of oversimplifying, I would turn all what you just said into a few words, which is, should government be bigger and more powerful, or smaller and less powerful?
And on what basis? And on what basis would somebody argue? And that's what I'm saying is, Charlie Kirk, what was interesting about what he said, I can argue my principles on a religious basis, or I can argue it on a purely logical basis, because they are compatible. I don't need to say, well, all of this is true only because God ordains it. He said, I don't need that. I can say that a society is more prosperous if these are the principles and values that it operates on.
I really like that, because I think there's a lot of variety in truth. There's not just one truth and one way to find it. There's a bunch of ways of understanding truth. And as an engineer, I know there's often different methods to get to the answer.
Yeah.
And it's always best when the methods all reach the same place.
They need to in engineering, or else you're going to have something that doesn't almost fits, but not quite.
Yeah. Well, some other time we should have a discussion on here about this aspect of truth, because in science there's generally one or a limited number of answers. Okay, the square root of 4 is 2, but it's also negative 2. -2 times -2 equal + 4. So the square root of 4 has 2 answers.
Okay.
Okay, it's not just one.
All right.
And generally in engineering, there's a range of things that will work. The criteria for the bridge have to be between X and Y, otherwise it's going to fall down. And so it's not like there's always just one correct answer, even in engineering.
Yeah.
But in the arts, the more answers, the better, the richer. The more perspectives, the more meanings that you can find in a piece of art or a dance or whatever, the better. And so it's like the opposite.
Yeah.
You find truth in richness and plenitude and fertility, rather than limiting it to one.
Yeah.
So,
well, I just find I thought the memorial service was not the end. I think it's I'm not going to say the beginning, because Turning Point had begun prior to that. But in the case of Martin Luther King, when he was assassinated, the Southern Poverty Law Center ceased to exist over a very short period of time. And so Martin Luther King's legacy is in his speeches and his writings, but not in the operations of an organization.
yes.
Turning Point, I think, is different in that single regard.
You think it will be different? This is another really interesting aspect of truth, because, as you know, I wrote a book, and one of the chapters is about truth and deception. So some of the things I'm saying come from thinking about that for a long time. Truth is never about the future. We don't know what the truth is about the future until it happens. It's a speculation about what we think is going to happen, and usually we can predict accurately. We know that we think the sun's going to come up tomorrow. There's a possibility it won't. Right. There's a rich area of mathematics called Bayesian economics or Bayesian theory, which basically takes into account that the probability is about what we know, not just about independent facts. It's about what we know. We don't know a lot of things about the future. So I might say, the Cubs are going to win the World Series this year. It's not truth. It's a speculation about what I think is going to happen.
And even if you were to say that a Major League Baseball team will win the World Series this year, that assumes that there will be a World Series this year.
It assumes that the rules will stay the same, and ridiculous exceptions we can say, but they are logically real.
Yes, and so that gets into, and I don't want to get into this too deeply here, but one of the things that Charlie Kirk talked about over and over again, and he said, I can base it on religion, and I can base it on logic, is there's certain human nature is predictable. Not necessarily that each individual will react a certain way, but that humans as a group will react a certain way depending on changes.
Yes.
And so this was a lot of what he talked about to students. And I just am fascinated and eager to watch what happens to Turning Point in the years that I have left. And so I'm going to be following that very carefully. But Mike, I wanted to get into a few other things that are going on right now that are not unrelated, but they're not turning point issues per se.
So they're not unrelated means they're related, being the
In some way,
magician that you are.
in some way,
Yes.
in some way.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's why I say that there's another term I use that you
You're
don't
so
like.
careful.
Yes, I am. Yes, I try to be careful. But Karl Rove wrote an article, and actually, I don't know if he wrote an article, if he did an interview, because this is an article about what he said. But Karl Rove said that if the government shuts down, in fact, he did write an article. It's in the Wall Street Journal. He said that if government shuts down, there's one great loser, and that is if government shuts down, it means that the public will lose trust, will lose even more trust in government. And he wrote that, and I told you that. And,
Before we came on the podcast,
Yeah.
and it took me a couple of seconds, and then I just chuckled.
you just laughed at that.
Yeah, like was there trust to begin with?
Yeah, and
You
should
know?
there be?
Yes.
Even more, was there trust to begin with, and should we trust the government? And is our government organized in such a way that would cause people to trust it? My response to that is that we fought the Declaration of Independence because we didn't trust the British government. And then when we drafted the Constitution, we put in all kinds of checks and balances. We tried to limit the power of the federal government because we didn't trust human nature.
Yes.
We didn't trust human nature to have a concentration of power in one place. And so we tried to create a Constitution with checks and balances and with the power really residing over how people would live their lives at the state level.
I was going to say, for me, one of the key angles on that is the further away it is from me, the less I trust it, because the less I can see it and the less I can know about the liberties that are being taken with my money and the authority that I've given by my vote. So I trust local government a lot more than.
Now, in your case, what is the most local government that can affect you? And this is a trick question.
Well, family, I would say.
Oh, you beat me. You're right. That would be your first. What would be the next? Your homeowners association.
Yeah, I think that's right. I am subject to and I've agreed to be subject to those rules.
Yeah. It's just an interesting thing. So, and then we have Nashville. We have our local government, and then we have state government, and we like the idea. I think as Americans, this is why what Karl Rove said was just so wrong, so incorrect in terms of what's good or bad.
Yeah.
And that is that I don't care what the people in California do to govern themselves, because I don't live there and I don't have to live under their rules.
Yeah, as long as those rules don't end up governing me.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And which in some cases they do. They're so big they adopt, say, textbook standards or gasoline things that end up affecting markets all across the country. So I'm with that kind of
caveat,
exception.
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And then there was another article that I want to talk just briefly about by Holman Jenkins. And Holman Jenkins writes for the Wall Street Journal. He may write other places, but I read him in the Wall Street Journal.
He's a regular columnist.
Regular columnist, and I generally find his columns to be interesting, and some of them are really interesting.
Yeah.
And this particular one, I read it and I said, boy, that can go so many different directions, because he said some things in his column that he believes are immutable truths, that because of this, because of that, because of this, therefore this must be true. And that is that he was talking about President Trump after the midterms will be a lame duck, which is technically accurate. And that
he can't stand for re-election.
And there won't be another election between that time and his leaving office.
Yes.
The midterms will be behind him.
Right.
But then he also said, he essentially said all lame ducks lose power and are less influential as a result of, or maybe it depends on which one you want to place first. Less influential and therefore less powerful, or less powerful and therefore less influential.
Can I just interject something
Sure,
here?
please.
It's only been about a year since people were saying this may be the last election we ever have.
Right.
They were saying on both sides. I think even Vance said something like that, which was absurd. But particularly the Never-Trumpers were saying once he gets in office, he's never going to leave.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Oh, sure. Well, they're still saying it. What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well,
I remember. They said it yesterday.
Well, it just is exactly the opposite of the idea of a lame duck.
Correct. That's a good point.
That's my point.
Yeah, that's a great
we're
point.
Here we're discussing his lame duckness.
Of course, now
that is
Holman Jenkins has never
He's
asserted that there won't be another election.
I just don't hear it much anymore. Maybe some people still believe that Trump's going to try to never leave office.
Oh, Pritzker said it the other day.
Did he?
Yeah. Tim Walz is still saying it. Gavin Newsom is saying it. So, I mean, all the people, all the wannabes, Kamala Harris, this was hysterical. Kamala Harris is almost her own little Saturday Night Live program and not even knowing it. I
like that framework. Keep going.
Kamala Harris on her book tour, she was railing against Trump and called him a communist. And then 2 sentences later, she endorsed Mamdani as the mayor of New York because he said he'd be a great mayor. And you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
And Mamdani himself has said the means of production should be controlled by the government. That is Marxism. That is exactly what.
Yeah.
Well, it's Marxism, i.e., communism.
Yeah.
If the government owns the means of production, and Mamdani said exactly that phrase.
Yeah.
And so I just found that to be fascinating. But getting back to Trump and the question of lame duckness, and so then he goes on in the article and he says that the polls right now. And so he said for the rest of his article, you have to assume that what the polls say turns out to be true, and that in the midterms, the Democrats will regain control of the House, and that Republicans will retain control of the Senate. So then he said, assuming that's true, he said, here's what will happen. He said the House will impeach Trump before the end of January. Which is probably true. I don't deny that would be, but they'll certainly impeach him quickly. The House will impeach him
if it changes hands.
If it changes hands, yes. But then he says, and then whether or not Trump remains in office will depend on whether or not there are his term ambitious Republicans.
Yeah, let me just step back and say we've said he certainly will do it. Certainly is the wrong word. We don't know that for sure. That's an intensely held conviction and speculation about what he thinks will happen.
What?
This is back to my point about truth, about the future.
Right.
It's not certain. It is strongly speculated.
Yeah, I'm only talking about his article.
Right.
and then the thoughts that it conjured up because it really, the essence of what I'm trying to get to is whether or not Trump will be a typical lame duck. So I'm accepting that the Democrats will win control of the House.
You think so?
I'm not saying I think that. For purposes of discussing his article,
okay, you're accepting that.
I'm accepting that will happen.
Okay.
Okay. I personally don't believe it will, but he says the current polls show that, and so therefore the rest of his article is based on that.
Good.
Yeah.
Got it.
So the Democrats win the House, and the Republicans retain control of the Senate. He then says, if the Democrats win the House, they will almost immediately move to impeach Trump. And I believe that if the Democrats do win the House, I believe they will quickly. I don't know what
it's not hard to believe.
Within 90 days.
Yeah.
Within 90 days, they will impeach Trump. And so now the, quote, trial will go to the Senate. But then he uses the term, he says, and Trump will remain in office unless some ambitious Republicans join the Democrats. Now that turn of phrase.
Yeah, ambitious for the grave.
Yeah, and so I'm saying, oh, an ambitious Republican. Who would be the best example recently using the behavior of opposing Trump as being ambitious? Who is the best?
Haley and Steve Pompeo challenged him for the nomination.
Well, but they weren't
in the last
senators.
election.
They weren't senators.
You didn't ask about that.
I'm saying I'm sticking with ambitious senators.
Okay.
Who's the best example recently of an ambitious senator who was a Republican who tried to get Trump out of office?
Well,
not running. I'm talking about tried to get him convicted in impeachment, in convicted in the Senate.
I am not recalling it, so why don't you tell us who
Mitt
you have
Romney.
in mind? Okay.
Mitt Romney went around and put personal notes in the little lockers of every single Republican senator on why Donald Trump needed to be removed from office by the Senate.
Yeah, I didn't get that because it's not in this term. That was back when he is prior term, right?
I know, but I mean, he was ambitious.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney was certainly ambitious,
Yeah.
and now he is on his back porch reading the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And so this gets to my next point here. What I think is interesting about this article, and that is assuming that Democrats win the House and impeach him, and the Senate does not remove him from office. Will Trump's lame duck status be similar to all the previous presidents' lame duck status, and that is that they lose influence and lose power? And I don't know which one's which, but they lose both. Will that be true with Trump?
Well, I got something else on my mind I want to say, which is my excessive language about ambition for the grave. In a time of political assassinations, that's reckless language.
Okay.
And I should say ambition for political desolation, or for being sent to the porch.
I think that's
what I meant.
Okay.
Okay.
I understood it that way.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you. I just want to make it clear.
Good.
Well, we're speculating about how much power and or influence. You distinguish between the two, and I'm eager to know the difference, but I take them to be about the same thing. Yeah. And so how much will he have after he is...
His final 2 years, assuming Democrats retain the House and Republicans retain the Senate, how much influence and power in his last 2 years will he be able to exert compared to the first 2 years of this term?
Well, what comes to mind for me is that you still have a lot of executive power that's being determined in the courts. I just was reading the other day, can you fire the head of FCC? Can you fire a Fed governor? Mm-hmm. There may be a sea change coming in this notion that the president can't do a lot of these things. That's been accepted since the bureaucratic state was built starting a century ago, that some of these things are beyond the direct influence, and the Constitution says that the president is the executive.
Well, so far Trump's 18-0 at the Supreme Court.
So far, and so my point is the amount of influence he has in that way will be determined by the courts, not by his standing, not by the standing of the Congress.
Okay,
and it's partisan.
Then let me change the question. Then influence over the Republican Party and the political people in the Republican Party.
I think he will have enormous influence continuing until the end and probably beyond.
Yes.
The end of his term.
And that was, Obama and Clinton have regularly gone out and campaigned on behalf of Democrats running for office. They have been amazingly ineffective. If the definition of effective is their endorsement and campaigning for them helped them win.
You said Obama and who?
Clinton.
Yeah.
The last two Democrat presidents have tried mightily.
Well, they were not the last two Democrat presidents. They were two of the last three. Biden was the last one.
Excuse me,
and
right.
He is a particularly ineffective one. They won't even, hire him to show up.
Okay. Well, then that's
your case.
Yeah. Well, helps make the point that Holman's trying to make is that all lame ducks are ineffective, and the question is, will Donald Trump be like all previous lame ducks? And I don't think so.
I think trends continue until they don't. I like that. It's this contingency that things are not known and certain as we may be inclined to think they are. And I think that historical trend of ineffectiveness after you lose office can change and is likely to change in this case.
Yes. And the reason I disagree with Jenkins here is that Trump, in a similar way to Charlie Kirk made something out of nothing. He made Turning Point out of nothing. And the influence that he has had and the effect of what he has done is you and I said his efforts may have resulted in the 2024 election of Trump. And I'm saying now I think that the organization will become more influential and more powerful and more of a force in our politics and our culture. I'm adding both of those things. And just as Kirk did that Trump singularly has built the MAGA movement. It didn't come from someplace else.
MAGA. What part of the United States are you from? We say MAGA in the South.
There's two movements, and they are so closely. They're so close.
Okay, it's like Duke's mayonnaise and Hellman's mayonnaise. The same thing with a different brand on it. All right.
Gosh, you are so.
I'm so quick.
So at any rate, but that movement, MAGA, that movement is Trump's movement. And the people who and here's the thing that's interesting to me. The reason to me that previous presidents lose influence, especially in their last 2 years, and then after they're out, I'm going to make a statement here that what presidents consistently do is they break their word they break their campaign pledges, or they will say like Obama. Obama said that Obamacare. You can keep your doctor if you want to. You can keep your insurance if you want to. Neither of those things turned out to be true. But the biggest falsehood that he said was it'll lower the cost of health care per family by $2,500, and it increased it by $10,000.
May I speak now?
Yes, you may.
You keep changing the subject. And,
No. It's about what causes presidents, what causes lame duck presidents to become less influential and less powerful.
Yes, I do have a comment about this.
Yes.
To me, it's not about what legislation or executive decisions you've made. It's about how you've changed hearts and minds.
I agree.
And I think Clinton had some effect in that way. I think Obama had some. Biden had very little.
Mm-hmm.
I said Biden. Biden had very little. But Trump has had a tremendous influence in demographically. You see the voting shifts among men, young men, among a bunch of among Hispanics. This is transformational.
Private sector union members,
yes,
the Teamsters.
Yes. So he is changing hearts and minds, and there's a long way for that movement to go. I mean, in historical terms, this could be, a little hill that recedes. It could be a hill that turns into a mountain. We don't know that yet, but to me, when we talk about continuing power and influence, it's the capacity to change hearts and minds.
Yes, and to be able to continue to do that. And what I'm suggesting here, for example, the first George Bush, he made one solemn pledge when he ran for office in 1988.
I think he probably made a lot of them, but there's
one
one that stands out in retrospect.
Yes, and that was, he said at his convention,
read my lips.
They will ask me to raise taxes, and I will say no. They will ask me again to raise taxes, and I will say no. And they will ask me again to raise taxes, and I will say, read my lips. No new taxes.
That's 6 words.
Yeah, and that was, the whole phrase matters because that was a solemn promise, and within 60 days, he broke that pledge, and he said, I had no choice. Well, then why in the world make that pledge that solemnly? That's the one pledge that stood out above all the other promises,
right.
That one.
Right.
And when he broke that promise, he lost credibility with the people who voted for him.
Why believe anything that he says?
Right, and why support him?
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is previous presidents break promises. They make claims that they make promises that they don't keep, and they lose the support of their supporters. Their supporters don't necessarily turn to the other side. They just lose the support of their supporters.
Do you think this has anything to do with why we don't trust government, at least in our part
of
the world?
Of course, yeah. I mean, this all kind of fits together. That's why. By the way, I want to just mention one other thing that Charlie Kirk did, because it's our podcast from our generation. Charlie Kirk also read the classics. He went back and studied Aristotle. He went back and studied every one of our great thinkers and the giants of political thought, which people can go to, thegiantsofpoliticalthought.com. Every one of those thinkers, Charlie Kirk studied them. Mm-hmm. Didn't have a college education, but he studied the ideas that changed the course of history. And so having said that, jumping back to Donald Trump may have made some very, very big, not just one, but he made many big campaign promises. And as far as I can think of, all of the ones I can think of, he has kept. His question on closing the border, whether you like it or not, he's kept that promise. he ran on a campaign. And this part, I didn't know how serious he was about it. But his campaign that no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, and no taxes on Social Security, and he put that in the very first piece of legislation that passed Congress was in there. And so for the next 4 years, there's no taxes on tips. There's no taxes on the overtime part of the overtime. There's no taxes on Social Security. Those are big deals. There's 70 million people that benefit by those particular tax cuts. And so the people who like Trump, the MAGA people who like Trump, still like him because he's doing what he told them he would do, and he's fighting for them. Okay, now he also said, I'm president of all the American people. I'm sure there are people who work for tips who didn't vote for Trump. I'm sure there are people who get overtime who didn't vote for Trump. I'm sure there are people who are on Social Security who didn't vote for Trump, but they're going to get those benefits. The 2017 extending or making the 2017 tax cut permanent helps a lot of people who didn't vote for Trump. And so, whereas the difference to me is that when Biden was in office, they passed these $1 trillion bills and they parceled it out to NGOs and their friends. That money was not dispersed generally to help all American people. It helped their supporters.
Yes.
And there's a big difference there. And so consequently, getting back to Jenkins' article, I think that Trump, even if the Democrats win the House, I think he'll be amazingly influential. I think he'll be still very powerful. And in fact, and I think even after he's out of office, I think if he, if you asked me, which you haven't, but I'm going to volunteer it anyway, who the Republican ticket as of right now, I think the Republican ticket in 2028 will be J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. And I think that Trump will bless. He will pick a ticket and endorse a ticket in the primaries. He won't sit the primaries out. That's my prediction.
You know, a question that occurs to me is will the unanimity in the Democratic Party splinter?
Which gets to my next up.
I am far-seeing. I don't know what you're going to say, but I'll finish what I was going to say,
yes.
Which is that the left is voting uniformly in the Senate, mm-hmm. right? And as the next presidential election comes, there'll be a reapportionment, as you know, and the votes will change from blue states to red. About 10 seats, I think, will shift mm-hmm. as of data from 2024. Mm-hmm. This will continue through the rest of the decade. So when the census, actually, this doesn't affect 2028 unless Trump can get it advanced like he's trying to do.
Right.
But if the zeitgeist, the shape of things is moving towards smaller government, and this continues, what Trump is doing, will some Democrats on the left see the tea leaves and start to get on board with that and defect from this uniform voting pattern that seems to suggest we're going to go back to progressivism as we've known it, because they insist on it. They're doing it right now in the budget dispute, whether we're going to shut down the government. Is that what you're going to talk about?
Yes.
Yeah.
See,
all right.
You even got to exactly the topic.
Take it away. See how
No. Go right ahead. We're on topic here.
So Schumer and Jeffries, the Senate and House senior people in the Democratic Party, are insisting they're not going to reauthorize the government, the continuing resolution.
Well, let's set the table for exactly where we are right now. The House has already passed the continuing resolution.
Yes.
Jeffries can say whatever he wants to. He has no power to do anything in the House about the continuing resolution.
They've already voted.
It's already passed.
Yes.
For a 60-day extension.
But the two of them are together out making these claims.
Right. Yeah, but Jeffries can't do anything. Schumer can.
Yes.
Because in the Senate, in order to pass a continuing resolution, it requires 60 votes. There are 53 Republicans, and I believe all 53 Republicans are voting for the continuing resolution. In order for the continuing resolution to pass, 7 Democrats will have to join Republicans.
Yeah.
And so far, Schumer has said no. We will not vote for the continuing resolution. And so what has Trump recently said that is now creating fractures in the Democrat Party.
He said we're not just going to temporarily furlough people. I think it's the word. We're not going to furlough them. We're going to lay them off.
We're going to fire them.
They're not coming back.
Yeah, yeah. And here's why he said that, because I've been digging into this. And this is what's so fascinating about the way our government works. Every single federal employee takes an oath of office before they get their first paycheck. And that oath of office is binding. It's not a nicety, okay? And so when you take that oath of office, you take an oath to uphold the Constitution. So I went back and looked, and it's kind of fun to go to AI to ask these questions and say, if the government shuts down, do Social Security payments go out? And AI says, yes, it's under the law, it's a bind, blah, blah, blah. Does Medicaid go out? Yes, blah, 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 blah. Does Medicare go out? All these different things. Does the military, does it continue? Yes. Does ICE continue? Yes. Does Border Patrol continue? Yes. All of these things, the answer is yes. What the Democrats were planning was for government employees who support in Washington, who support Democrats 95-5. What Schumer was counting on was federal employees who work in the Treasury Department, Social Security, not sending out the payments. And Trump has said, you don't do your job,
you're fired.
You will be fired. And they will not come back. And now that's got the Democrats in a tizzy because now the continuing resolution, if it doesn't pass, makes Trump, because the Democrats will have done it, makes Trump a dictator. Because when the government shuts down, the executive branch determines what continues. Now, there are certain things that the executive branch must continue. And among the ones that must continue are Social Security payments, Medicare payments, Medicaid, Obamacare, any of those things that are embedded in the law, they must continue. Now, whether or not
let me quibble with the word dictator. That means Trump doesn't get to determine that. It's in the law that will do it. I'm really cautious about because
fair enough.
So many people are claiming he's a dictator. I think he's vigorously using his powers. And I think he'll leave office at the end. I think he trolled people to pretend that he wasn't considering not leaving.
He says he wants to run again, and which is just funny.
Yeah. Okay.
But what I'm trying to get at is Schumer rails about Trump doing this and Trump doing that. But if the Democrats vote to shut down the government, under the law, it is the president who determines above the things that are mandated to continue. It's the president who determines what else is necessary.
Yes.
And so Schumer will essentially be handing the keys to the kingdom, if that's a nicer term.
Handing him an extraordinary degree of authority.
Thank you. That's well said. Thank you.
They have retired from it.
Yes. And so then the problem is the continuing resolution will have passed the House. It still will have passed the House.
Right.
And the Republican Senate will just keep bringing it up, and the Democrats will have to keep voting no, which gets to your question about will some of them decide that this is not, and then what?
I heard a story from my wife before we were dating. She had a boyfriend who wanted a car, and he went and offered X amount, and they said, no, that's ridiculous. And he went back a week later and offered X minus $100. And they said no. And he went back a week later and offered X minus $200. And finally they took X minus $300.
Okay.
So, I mean, you may have something like that going on, right? I don't know if that they're going to be subtracting, but they just keep bringing it up. And when does the straw break the camel's back?
Well, now this rolls into what then happens next. And so the continuing resolution, and by the way, the House passed the continuing resolution because for the first time in like 30 years, and don't hold me to that exact number, but there is a thing in the House called regular order.
Yeah.
Where every bill is supposed to go through, spending is supposed to go through a committee.
And they've done it once or twice in decades.
Yeah, I mean, and typically they just roll it forward and then pass a piece of legislation later on a particular spending.
Yeah, it's kind of Hail Mary when time's running out.
Right.
And they do it over and over and over.
Yes.
Because they can't agree on regular order.
They just, in the case of the Democrats, they didn't like it, and Republicans didn't get it done either. So I'm not going to be partisan about this. It just didn't happen.
Right.
But the Republicans now are trying to run every bill through the committees, and that is going to result in a budget that's much tighter. The next actual annual budget that passes, not a continuing resolution, will be much tighter than it has been in the past. And the Republicans in the House say, I need 60 more days to complete regular order. So even if the government shuts down, the Republicans in the House will still be running the bills that will be part of the 2026 budget. They'll be still running those through the committees. And so in 60 days, the Republicans in the House will have a budget for 2026 that will be complete that has gone through regular order. And so at that point, that will pass the House. Now this is because they wouldn't be running it through the committees and doing this.
Well, the continuing resolution passed, the Republicans can be expected to stick together on this. And so the Senate will again be confronted.
But this gets into a question that I don't know the answer to, and that is when you get to the actual budget itself, just as Republicans were able to pass some bill last spring without a 60 vote threshold. They were able to pass it by simple majority. I think they call it reconciliation.
Yeah, the rules get complicated.
I know. Yeah. What I'm saying is that it might be that is a majority vote.
And the budget is not the same as an appropriation.
Yes.
Right. That's just kind of a roadmap for what we're going to do, and then the appropriation should follow it or not.
Yes, but no. I mean, if you pass the budget, because we haven't been lately.
Yeah.
If we pass a budget and then don't pass any appropriations after we pass the budget, that is the appropriations for the next 12 months.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know that. So.
Yeah. So that's why it's so screwy the way Washington works. But they're trying to get it where it's actually kind of functioning the way it's supposed to.
Right.
And the House is going to complete a budget in 60 days for the first time in decades. This House will do that. The Democrats don't like what's going through the committees, but they can't stop it.
Yeah.
And so it'll pass. In the Senate, the Democrats can stop the continuing resolution. I don't believe that they could stop a vote on of an annual budget if that annual budget, the whole budget, has passed the House, which should happen in 60 days. But to me, the interesting thing is going to be whether or not, to your point that you brought up 10 or 15 minutes ago, is do the Democrats start to crack? Mm-hmm. And if Trump has now said, if a federal employee doesn't do their job, if the budget shuts down, if the government shuts down, and a federal employee does not do their job, they will be fired. And so now the Democrats know that I think the threat that the little game they were going to play, I don't believe that'll play because I think people believe Trump. I think federal employees believe that if they don't do their job, Trump will fire them.
They probably should believe it.
They should believe it. It's a good reason to believe it.
Yeah. So we're talking about returning to the constitutional order and restoring a lot of what was intended from our founders, looking toward more limited government, et cetera. There's another sunrise on the horizon that I just want to offer as maybe a topic for future, and that is XAI. Musk has now had an agreement with Trump that the federal government can use XAI in its operations. So they have artificial intelligence now that's going to be incorporated into the federal processes. What is that going to do to the nature of work in the bureaucracy?
Well, and not only the nature of work in the bureaucracy, but that's a great question, but also it'll make defrauding the government through it may make it
impossible.
It'll make it really dangerous if you try to defraud Medicare and Medicaid by changing codes and doing different things, because they'll be able to compare like this one medical practice to other medical practices.
They just uncovered like a $15 billion scam.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah,
they're everywhere. Well, Michael, we've had a lot to talk about today. We didn't cover some of the other things that I wanted, but there is one other item I want to talk about.
Okay.
Gavin Newsom made a big deal a few days ago of signing legislation that says that ICE agents cannot wear masks. But he also, in the bill, it doesn't include Antifa can wear masks, but ICE agents cannot wear masks in California. And if they do wear masks, according to Gavin Newsom, it is a criminal offense. Now, the federal government at about the same time, put out a press release that if you lay hands on an ICE agent, that is a criminal act under federal law.
I have two comments. One is that looks like the Keystone Cops to me. It's ridiculous.
Which one?
The California legislation that you're going to deny masks to federal government, but not deny it to
Criminals.
B, federal law is superior to state law.
Okay.
Period.
Okay. Now, so what I hope happens is that some ICE agent and a couple of local policemen decide that the way to handle this is for the local policeman to, quote, detain the ICE agent but not touch him, and call the governor and say, I've got an ICE agent here. Governor, would you please come handcuff him? And let the governor lay hands on the ICE agent and see whether or not Newsom shows up to
You're good at imagining these scenarios.
I am.
I have to say, I am sympathetic with the idea that you shouldn't be arrested by a masked person that you don't know who they are. You know, this is like
they're ICE.
Well,
it says ICE. It's like FBI. FBI has FBI all over them.
Yeah, well, you can get one of those uniforms and show up and impersonate. You know, there's a problem with assuming that somebody that's driven up behind your car with a light on it is a policeman. They may not be.
Well,
so
what does the mask have to do with that?
They're hiding who they are. You can't tell who they are.
Well, what does that have to do with whether or not they're fakes? What does that have to do with whether or not they're fakes? Nothing. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not they're fakes. A fake ICE agent doesn't have to wear a mask, and nobody's going to dox them because they're not an ICE agent to begin with.
Well, of course, the reason they want ICE agents to have this is because their families are being threatened, and they're being threatened personally, and so they don't want their personal identities out.
Correct. But one thing Newsom says is they don't identify themselves as ICE. That's a lie.
Yeah, they do.
They have ICE on their back, on their front and their back.
Right.
And then they also say Newsom said they then pick people up and disappear them. That's false too. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people they're picking up have already had their orders to be deported, so they've already had their due process. And so almost everything that Newsom says about this is false. But what I find interesting, and you've already pointed out, federal law supersedes local law. And so the ICE agents will continue.
Yeah, they'll prevail.
They'll continue in California, but I just wonder whether or not there are any policemen in California who are dumb enough to lay hands on an ICE agent and try to arrest him.
Well, this raises the question of defection that we were talking about the Democrats before. Some going to start to defect from this uniform front. You may have policemen that say, I'm not enforcing that.
Well, they can't enforce it if federal law puts them in jail. That's what I'm saying. The federal government has said if you lay hands on an ICE agent, and that doesn't matter whether you're a local policeman or not, you lay hands on an ICE agent and we will prosecute you to the full extent of the law. That's 5 years in prison.
Yeah.
Why would a local policeman subject themselves to that? Why would they even do that? I'm not even talking about breaking away from the Democrats. I'm saying, why would they do it? Now, so in the next few weeks, it's going to be very interesting to watch what goes on in California. So, and we'll have lots to talk about.
We always do.
In a week. So, Michael, I appreciate your time and great fun today.
Sayonara.
You bet.